It's crazy how much Dollywood has expanded over the last few years. I feel like there's always a new ride or a new roller coaster coming up for that park. So it's a very, very interesting park to think about and discuss. And now that I got to visit the park this summer, I feel like I'm qualified to make a wish list video for this park. So in this video, I will be diving into the attractions that I think will make this park even better than it is today. This video is going to be coaster heavy because I do consider Dollywood a coaster park or an amusement park. Let's look at what types of roller coasters would improve this park the most and make their coaster lineup even more well-rounded than it currently stands today. Dollywood just added their 10th roller coaster in 2023 with Big Bear Mountain, and I feel like they have a very well-rounded lineup. I have 6 ideas for my wish list for Dollywood. So for number 6, let's talk about a B&M invert. For a long time, it felt like everyone really wanted a B&M invert at Dollywood before they opened Dragon Flyer in Wildwood Grove, but I would make the argument that a B&M invert would still be a really great fit at Dollywood. If you look at Kings Island, I just made a video ranking the Kings Island coaster lineup, and they have 4 freaking inverted coasters. So I think it would be perfectly reasonable for Dollywood to have 2, one being family/family thrill with Dragon Flyer, and the other being a full-scale thrill coaster in this B&M invert. Plus, the latest B&M invert to come to the United States was in 2014 with Banshee, and I love Banshee, dude. That's my favorite invert, but I do need rerides on Alpengeist, Montu, and Afterburn. So if a layout came to Dollywood that's just as creative and fun as Banshee, I feel like it would work beautifully. And if you look at the inverting coasters at Dollywood right now, we have Wild Eagle, which yeah, it's a B&M, but I would make the argument that it's totally different from a B&M invert. I feel like an invert would have a lot more positive G's than Wild Eagle does. Wild Eagle is very graceful, so I feel like those rides could coexist. Plus, there's plenty of parks across the United States that have multiple B&Ms that kind of do the same thing. Looking at you, Magic Mountain. So a wing coaster and an invert would work pretty well in my opinion. Plus, Tennessee Tornado and Mystery Mine have completely different dynamics than a B&M invert, so it could definitely work. And I would love to see a layout that's just as creative as Banshee's layout, maybe on a smaller scale. I know a lot of people have been criticizing newer B&M inverts for failing to be as whippy as their original layouts were. I agree with it, but it's not the biggest deal in my opinion, so if they could try to adjust it to bring back some of the whippiness of something like Flight Deck, that could be awesome. If you put the corkscrew on Flight Deck on a layout like Banshee, it would be like the best of both worlds, you know? So I feel like this would be a great fit at Dollywood. And all their coasters that go upside down, Mystery Mine goes upside down twice. I believe Tennessee Tornado has 3 inversions. Wild Eagle only has 4. So if you get something with like Banshee that has 7 or something in that range, I feel like that would definitely make this ride stand out. Dollywood's loopiest coaster, you know? It could definitely work. So moving on to my 5th idea for my Dollywood wish list. This will be basically a Vekoma thrill coaster, like a next-gen Vekoma thrill coaster. Dollywood added Dragon Flyer, as I mentioned earlier, and now they just added Big Bear Mountain. So I feel like a full-scale Vekoma thrill coaster would be awesome. We obviously don't have that in the United States yet, and with Dollywood working so closely with Vekoma recently, it feels like Dollywood would be one of the strongest contenders for a full-scale thrill coaster from Vekoma. I think they could definitely use a launch coaster since Lightning Rod is losing its launch. 2 other launch coasters are family coasters, so having a thrilling launch coaster, maybe something like Abyssus at Energylandia, that could be really cool. I know next to nothing about new gen Vekoma outside of the American projects. Like, I'm not sure how they ride, but it feels like Dragon Flyer and Big Bear Mountain are huge hits for the general public, so I feel like it would be a great fit at Dollywood. It definitely wouldn't be as intense as Lightning Rod or Thunderhead from what I could gather. So I feel like a graceful launch coaster with inversions and hopefully airtime moments, that would be perfect. Because as we're gonna get into later, I feel like graceful airtime slash floater airtime is kind of a gap in this park's lineup. So if they had a modern Vekoma, I feel like it would include some floater airtime, maybe ejector, but you know, from what I understand, Abyssus is more floaty than intense. So I feel like that would be a great fit at this park. But moving on to number 4, this will be an indoor thrill coaster of some kind. So if we look at Silver Dollar City, they're basically rebuilding Fire in the Hole, and I think that's really cool. So maybe if Dollywood did something similar with Blazing Fury, like Blazing Fury Reborn or something, I feel like that could be really cool. I wasn't very impressed with Blazing Fury. It felt pretty underwhelming and outdated in my opinion, but you know, I'm a spoiled Disney shill, so my standards for dark rides are kind of ridiculously inflated. But if they didn't want to do a project like that, like the Fire in the Hole project at Silver Dollar City, just having an indoor coaster could be really cool. If they went the family route, I feel like it could be great in Wildwood Grove if they would be able to squeeze it in somewhere. I know there's a bunch of room back behind Big Bear Mountain, but they kind of blocked it off. I'm not sure if they could expand back there anymore. Maybe if they put a show building back there and then they had like a queue that wraps around Big Bear Mountain, that could work. But then the queue would be ridiculously long, but you know, just theme it well. Have it like the Indiana Jones queue at Disneyland. That could be really fun. And I know Dollywood is open basically year-round, so if they had a major indoor attraction that isn't Blazing Fury, I feel like that could really benefit this park. Moving on to number 3, I'm going to talk about a mock extreme spinner, because I freaking love Time Traveler, and I really want more of these things to get built, and I feel like Dollywood is one of the strongest contenders to get one. I really hope this happens at some point. I'm kind of disappointed that it hasn't happened already, because Time Traveler is an absolutely elite roller coaster, and Ride to Happiness just looks insane. So I really hope the United States gets another mock extreme spinner. And I know Dollywood would do it right. I'm sure it would have a fantastic layout. I'm sure it would be themed well, plus the setting would be beautiful. That would just be so much fun. And they have nothing that spins, so it could definitely work really well, plus the airtime and the inversions. They don't have a coaster that does both. It's basically one or the other. I mean, unless you count Wild Eagle's first drop as an airtime moment, but that's pretty weak in my opinion. So this would be a very strong fit. If you watch my Kings Island wish list, you know I talked about a Mock Rides Extreme Spinner for that park too. So I feel like Kings Island and Dollywood are top contenders to get one of these things. In reality, I feel like Dollywood is more likely than Kings Island, but I would be more than happy if both get a mock extreme spinner, and I feel like they're far enough apart that it could work, so that would just be incredible. Plus I feel like there's so much potential with these layouts. Like, I really want to see different variations. Mock Rides is also just one of the most exciting manufacturers in the industry in my opinion, so I would really love to see more of their work just in general, outside of wild mice, whatever. This is the part of the video where I have to emphasize this is a wish list, because number 2 is a B&M Giga. Let's go. Giga at Dollywood. Why not, man? I feel like this would be awesome. As I mentioned at the top of the video, Dollywood has been expanding incredibly rapidly, and I don't believe they have any height limitations, so just full send it. Build the Giga, man. That would be so amazing. If Dollywood built a Giga, I feel like it would be the best setting for any Giga coaster in the world. I mean, yeah, Millennium Force is pretty cool, but I'm a sucker for wooded settings. Like, if they gave this ride its own valley, like Lightning Rod, like, oh my gosh, man, that would be bonkers crazy. It would obviously be an icon of the park. It would be a standout coaster, and I feel like it would be more well-liked than Lightning Rod. I feel like a lot of the general public is kind of iffy on that ride. I know, obviously, the enthusiasts love it, and I love it, but a Giga would just be accepted by everyone as basically the hands down the best ride, you know? Like, if they are able to build a Giga terrain coaster, that pretty much doesn't exist right now, so if they build that, I feel like it might just become the best coaster in the world by like default. Like, those words put together is like every roller coaster enthusiast's fantasy, you know? It would just be incredible. It would be wild. That would be so much fun, man. So I don't know how likely this is. I really hope it happens at some point. Like, just this concept in general has so much freaking potential. So let's see if it happens at some point. I know Dollywood has recently, they've been focusing playing on their family appeal. So I don't know if they would turn around and build something as crazy as a Giga Coaster. Maybe down the line if their marketing strategy changes. But yeah, a Giga Coaster at Dollywood has got to be on the list, you know? Basically every major park that doesn't have a Giga already, there's going to be a Giga on my wishlist videos. So you might want to get used to this. And the words Giga Terrain Coaster in one sentence is just perfection, man. Perfection. But I'm not going to let myself get too carried away here because number one is a hyper coaster. I feel like this is much more realistic than the Giga Coaster. And plus, if you want to look at it from a really optimistic point of view, if you get a Giga Coaster first, there's no way you get the hyper. But there have been multiple occasions in coaster history where a park has built a hyper coaster and then a Giga, like Cedar Point, Kings Island, Canada's Wonderland, Carowinds. So maybe if the hyper coaster happens first, the Giga Coaster could still happen down the line. But if you go for the Giga straight away, there's basically no point in building a hyper coaster because why would you build a smaller version of something you already have, you know? But I'm definitely a B&M hyper fanboy. As you know, Diamondback is my number one overall, and that's a B&M hyper that goes out into the woods. So I feel like Dollywood would be a prime contender to build another B&M hyper that goes out into the woods. So just that idea alone has me going crazy. Like I would love that. That's right up my alley. That would be perfect. But I recognize that a lot of people don't like B&M hypers as much as I do. So that's what I would go with. But there's also the possibility of a Vekoma hyper. As we talked about earlier, Dollywood has been working with Vekoma a lot recently. So it's very possible that they could be the manufacturer of a Dollywood hypercoaster. Or the other one, as I mentioned earlier, mock rides. We don't have a mock hyper in the United States, and Dollywood could definitely be a solid contender to receive a mock hyper for this country. For me, I would hope for the B&M, but you know, I definitely wouldn't complain if it was a Vekoma or a mock. Those would definitely be super exciting as well. Don't get me wrong, I definitely want to see a Vekoma hyper and a mock hyper in this country, but just with Dollywood's setting, I would prefer if it was the B&M, you know? I would rather put the mock or the Vekoma somewhere that isn't as exciting. Like if you put a mock hyper on a parking lot, I feel like people would be just as excited for that ride, but if you put it in a terrain setting like Dollywood, people would still be excited for it. Like either way, if you put a B&M hyper on a parking lot, that already exists. That's Intimidator at Carowinds. But if you put it in a terrain setting with, you know, trees around, that's like right up my alley, and I feel like that would make a B&M hyper more exciting for other people, you know? So I hope Dollywood goes with the B&M, but you know, let's see what happens. I feel like a hypercoaster could be realistic at some point. I know that they even put out a survey like a few years ago. I think an indoor coaster, a mock extreme spinner, and a hyper were all on that list. And as you can tell from this video, all three of those ideas are on my wish list. I would love if all three of them happened. This park is always expanding, it feels like, so I'm super excited to see what Dollywood does next, and I'm super excited to return to this park at some point in the future. Please let me know what you think of my ideas for the future of Dollywood, and let me know if you have a better coaster concept for Dollywood. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you later.